amount of things to celebrate. We were talking about that in class this morning. And there's an amazing amount of energy in the universe right now too, particularly our little quadrant of the universe. There's, with this full moon and Mercury in retrograde and all these other anomalies that we associate with. And so it seems like things are a little bit of a roller coaster ride right now. A lot of ups and downs for everybody. And it's interesting that it comes on this weekend, this weekend of Easter. Yeah, this weekend of the full moon, the weekend of Hanuman Jayanti. Because this whole weekend is about transformation. It's about resurrection. It's about new beginnings and the endings of some things. And so as a result of that, we get to really explore how energy affects us day in and day out. And we get to take a very close look at how we define our path in this life. What are we even doing, And sometimes that's a very valid question. It's like, well, I'm a Christian, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a yogi, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, but what am I really doing? How do I get from point A to point B? Is there even a point B? Is there even a point? And so weekends like this, days like this, or times like this, they give us the opportunity to really reflect on what the purpose of our path is. And with regard to Easter, the purpose is quite clear, that the path results in a sense of resurrection of the spirit. Now, whether you're looking at that as, Christ resurrecting from the dead, or you and I resurrecting from our day-to-day life, being caught in the mundane things, being aggravated by there not being enough specialness in our lives on a day-to-day basis. Today gives us the opportunity to sit down and to say, what's my priority here? What am I working on? And what path do I best follow in order to experience that personal resurrection, or that personal awakening, that personal enlightenment? And so in class this morning, we talked a bit about how in yoga there are many paths that are talked of. There's Patanjali's Eightfold Path, there's the Buddha's Eightfold Path, there's the Tantra path, the Hatha path, the Vedic path, many different paths that you could do. But for the most part, whether you're talking about yoga or another tradition, every path has 3 parts to it. Every path has 3 parts. And the first part is associated in yoga with Kali or with Durga. And that part of the path has to do with understanding that desires drive us. That on a day-to-day basis, and a moment-to-moment basis, the things that we desire are what motivate us. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a human thing. So we say that there are 3 qualities of the mind: tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas is the quality of the mind that is driven by desire. It's driven by obsessive compulsive behaviors. It's driven by a sense of feeling as if we don't have enough. And that tamasic nature, which has some rajasic qualities to it as well for those studying Ayurveda, but that is generally a tamasic tendency, where we get stuck in habitual patterns of thinking, habitual judgments, habitual behaviors, and all to acquire satisfaction of the desires. So the first step, or the first stage in our spiritual journey, is understanding this. Understanding that this is what causes our suffering. The idea that we grasp. Say, I like that harmonium, I want that, and I'm going to go to any extent I have to get it. And then understanding that that mentality causes suffering because it sets us up for the experience of great disappointment. I did go to great extents to get that harmonium. I purchased it once, and then it arrived, and it was locked, and the key didn't work. So I sat with it, and I was like trying to fidget it and trying to pick the lock, getting all frustrated. Oh, darn. Waited so long for this to come in, and now it doesn't work. And so I called the company, and they're like, send it back, we'll send you a new one. I said, okay, so now I trudge it down to the post office, figure out a way to get them to, to send it over there so it's safe, and they send me a new one. And the new one didn't play. It unlocked just fine, but not a note would come out of it. So I'm sitting there and I'm grasping at this, and I'm like, but I want to learn how to play harmonium. I want this. This is my desire. And there was a little voice inside of me that said, there was one little voice that said, call them and send it back. Piece of garbage. Didn't pay enough money for it, so it doesn't work. They don't know what they're doing. How could they send me something that doesn't work? I paid decent money for it. Another voice inside of me said, be quiet and wait and have patience and stop being driven by your desires. So I did call them. I called them a few times actually, and I messaged them, and they were so kind. Sudha, just send it back, But something in that other voice just said, be patient. It's not time yet. Not time. So I never sent it back. I just held on to it for 2 years, maybe longer. Just held it. It's a harmonium. It doesn't work. It looked real pretty in my meditation space. Just sitting there. I was like, well, maybe I'll buy a second one. But I didn't. I just kept waiting. And every once in a while I would try it, and it wouldn't work. So we move here. And some of you know how this story ends already, but we move here. And again, as we're going through this process of decreasing the amount of stuff that we're carrying with us, downsizing, still it stayed with me. I decided not to get rid of it. I brought it here, put it in the meditation temple on the other side of the building. And one night, it was after Kirtan, and there was a lovely gentleman that we just met named Mohan. And we went in there, and we were all talking. And at that point, we had been gifted 2 other harmoniums, one from a local temple up in Allentown, and one from a good friend. And so we're sitting in there, and Mohan's playing the one harmonium. And so I told him the story of the red harmonium, and pulled the red harmonium out of the corner, opened it up, and she played like a charm. Seriously, she played like a charm.
Is that one?
That's the one. Yeah. So this first stage of our spiritual journey is understanding that there is a time for everything, and not becoming overly obsessive, compulsive, grasping, simply because things don't fit the way we think they should in our ego. And instead, practicing patience, the process of witnessing, understanding that things are as they're meant to be, for whatever reason we may not understand. And then that first stage overlaps with the second stage. So they're not sequential. They constantly morph in and out of each other. The second stage is associated with rajas. It's associated with the ego, and it's associated with a form of ignorance that is very strongly based in desires. And so the ego becomes aggravated. The harmonium doesn't work. I want to play, but I can't right now because that's the only one I have. And so suddenly I start making these judgments, like, well, maybe I'm just not supposed to, maybe I need to hear the message of the universe, or I'll just put it away till later. And then suddenly I start to devalue the thing because the ego needs to be able to justify and also needs a really great story. And so we come to this place where the ego is out of control and it's using desires to feed itself. And I think, well, okay, I've got the one about the harmonium under control now. I'm just going to be patient with it, let it sit there. But then dissatisfaction creeps up in another way. It comes up in, I don't know, the car breaking down, too much cold weather this winter, things not moving along at a fast enough pace, things moving along at too fast of a pace. I want chocolate. Whatever the desire is. If we don't take the desire from the root and finish it completely, then that desire will come back tenfold, 100-fold, 10,000-fold. So the second stage brings us into an understanding that desires are the result of us looking at the universe and thinking that there's something lacking. We look at the universe and we say, well, I need more. I need this to work in the way that my ego wants it to work. I need less. In some way, shape, or form, there's something lacking. And so this brings us to Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, and the concept of natural abundance. And understanding that all things are as they're meant to be, and there is enough for everyone. There is enough love, there is enough food, there is enough wealth, there is enough prayer, there is enough community, there is enough for everyone. That's not the problem. The problem is that the ego gets involved and starts saying, well, but I want just a little bit more than what you have, so that I feel important, special, like I matter. Oh, and if you don't feel like you do, that's okay. Then I'll just tell you how to fix it. And we get caught in this, as parents, as friends, as enemies, as whatever we define ourselves as. We get caught up in this. Even as servants in community, we get caught up in this. We tend to think, well, if I go, and work at the local soup kitchen, handing out soup to people, or whatever they're serving, then I'm doing great work. You might be doing great work. But for the second stage, for the second step in our spiritual journey, the question has to be answered, how do you look at those you're serving? How do you see them? Do you see them pitifully? Do you see them as unempowered? Do you see them as lacking? Or do you recognize that they, in their spiritual self, have placed themselves in this predicament, in this lifetime, so that you have the opportunity to experience abundance? Or do you see them as lowly, beneath you, and you're doing some great kind of work, feeding those who don't have what you have? To feed another person food, to nourish them, is not to belittle, it's to share. There's a beautiful tribe in the northwest region of North America, and they have this wonderful potluck that they do, I think it's once a year. And what happens is that there's like one family that's in charge of all the wealth. And so this festival happens, and everyone brings the wealth forward and they place it at the feet of the person whose turn is next. Now you have everything, you have all of the abundance. Be generous with it, because it doesn't really belong to you. You're the steward, the caretaker, the caregiver. You're the one who makes sure that things stay balanced. So don't be greedy. Don't get full of your ego, thinking that you have so much more than others, because it's an illusion. And so year after year, they do this beautiful festival, this festival of abundance. And every year somebody new gets it. And their job is that even though they receive that abundance, they need to stay humble. And they need to recognize that it's not really theirs, but they are the steward of the abundance. And so they need to be a good steward and make sure that everybody has what they need. So in the first stage, we have Kali. And Kali, the goddess of time and transformation, she's there because she has this amazing capacity to undo our desires in one fell swoop. She has this beautiful lolling tongue and a mouth that opens as wide as the universe. So she can consume things in their entirety. And then, just so we don't succumb to our tendency of fear, of lacking, second stage, we have Lakshmi, who is constantly reminding us that there is enough. There is so much. There is so much more than just enough. There is absolute perfection in what is in every moment. And then the third stage that we come to in our spiritual journey, which again overlaps with the others, but definitely each has different levels to its understanding, is the sattvic stage. The stage of moving away from ignorance, away from wrong understanding, and into wisdom and truth. And this stage is guided or manifests through the essence of Saraswati. She's the goddess of creativity and education, the goddess of knowledge. One of her names is Vak, and the word Vak means sound. And so if we study Saraswati, and if we chant the mantras, pray the prayers, express the love, what we find is that sound takes on a quality of absoluteness, absolute truth, absolutely. Not the sound of the day-to-day opinions, not the sound of our human voice trying to make some sense of what's happening in the world around us, because our human language is very limited. I could say, "Hi, Regina," and Regina could, in the back of her mind, be saying, "What's she mean by that?" Right? It happens all the time. Things are unclear in our human voice, with one exception. If we're chanting or praying. The primordial sound of the universe in yoga is Om. And typically speaking, yoga practitioners, they understand that it's the primordial sound of the universe, but do they actually understand what that means? Well, it means oneness. Yes, but what does that mean? Well, it means some kind of truth. Yes, but what does that mean? The sound Om encompasses everything. It is everything in a sound vibration. It is the pureness of all things everywhere. And when we start to take bits and pieces of it, we start to see language, like English and French and German. When we chant the sound Om, we are enlivening our internal world and the external world around us in a sense of completeness, wholeness, and absolute truth. There's no place there for opinion. But when we start breaking it down and I start saying, well, oneness means, or Om means oneness, then that might mean something completely different to you than what it means to me. And therefore, a chasm emerges. A shift in understanding, and the truth becomes fragmented. The moment we start to explain the thing, then it takes on a very personalized quality about what your tendency is in your life and how you go about understanding things. But if we just get together and chant Om, it speaks for itself. But the moment we start to explain what it means, then it's like there are 7 boards here on the wall, and each one has beautiful lotus flowers painted on it, and some dragonflies, and a crane, and a butterfly. And each board represents a different understanding, a different expression of the lotus flower. They're all beautiful, but they are different. So now you have 7 people in front of those 7 boards, and you explain to each one of them the same exact explanation of what Om is, what it means. And each person will walk away with just a little bit of a different understanding. Unless you just have them chant Om and don't worry about the explanation. The thing speaks for itself. So this 3rd stage of our spiritual journey is exploring and uncovering, rediscovering what truth is and what non-truth is, what reality is and what the non-real is, the unreal. And then we go back to stage 1, because that's a super uncomfortable place to be. Because it requires, on some level, that we let go of stories, that we let go of judgments, that we let the person who is a Muslim be a Muslim. Let the Christian be a Christian, let the Jew be a Jew, let the yogi be a yogi, let people be who they are. But we say, oh, I don't know. If I let them do what they want to do, then that means that on some level I must be wrong. And the only reason why you think that is because you stopped chanting Om and you started explaining yourself. Started justifying. And that takes us back into step 2. Recognizing that there is such abundance in the universe, in the world, and in this moment that you don't need to fear. You don't need to fear being right or wrong. You don't need to fear being obsolete or important. You don't need to fear lacking versus being worthy. You don't need to fear anything. And that brings us into stage 3 again. Acquiring or revealing the deep, deep wisdom of truth that exists within us. And then that gets super uncomfortable, so back to stage 1. And so we learn how to let go a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, in flavors and in ways that we can maneuver a sense of being comfortable. And in yoga, that's what we call tapas. Tapas, discipline, patient discipline, compassionate discipline, waiting and having faith in the waiting. Because it's not the outcome that matters. It's the waiting. It's what you do in the time that you're sitting in the doctor's office that matters. So, you go to the doctor's office, right? And the first thing they're going to do to you when you walk into the doctor's office, when you walk into his actual examination room, is what? Take your blood pressure, right? So you're sitting in the waiting room, and the guy from the pharmaceutical company walks in and sits across from you, and you get a little perturbed because you know they're going to take him first, even though he came in after you. And then somebody else comes in. And then the doctor is behind the desk talking to the secretary or something, and you're getting more upset. You're getting more discomforted, more dissatisfied with the whole experience, and you're not breathing, and you're not chanting mindfully to yourself, and you're not saying affirmations to yourself, and you're not remembering the abundance of the universe. You're just getting yourself so pissed off that when you go into that examination room, you're going to have high blood pressure. And then the doctor's going to tell you what? Now you need a pill. So it's not the end result that matters so much. It's the waiting that matters and what you do with it. Are you preparing yourself for whatever the outcome is? Because maybe you do have high blood pressure, and maybe you don't. But what have you done? How have you lived to have each moment be full of acceptance, patience, calmness, goodness, so that the outcome takes care of itself? You walk into the examination room and then they say, you've got high blood pressure. I knew it! This life, it sucks. People are mean. This, that, the other thing. It's all their fault. Or have you toned your nervous system in such a way that if the doctor does say, well, you've got high blood pressure, say, okay, well, let me see how to live with that now. Let me see how to express my inner goodness with that now. Let me see how, let me learn, let me acquire the knowledge, stage 3, of how to live well anyway. That's a task. But that's what this time of the year is really about. It's about how to be alive anyway, how to be enlivened, how to have your spirit resurrected from the difficult moments, from the disbelief, from the challenges, from whatever you're facing in this life. How to resolve into your brightest spirit. So what do you think? Any thoughts? Any questions? Lots of questions. Isn't it great, though? And and I think that the beautiful thing about this in yoga, no matter where you look, there is such symmetry. So here now we have this beautiful trio called the Tri-Devi. We have Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Durga Kali, sometimes called Parvati also. And we look at them, and initially we might look at them and say, oh, they're such pretty goddesses. They have such a flow of esoteric wisdom, whatever that is, And we don't realize that they actually hold the key to our spiritual journey. They actually hold the key to each stage that we go through over and over and over again. They also hold the key to the chakra energy centers in the body. Kali Durga are the root chakra and the lower abdominal chakra and the upper abdominal chakra. Durga Kali is the essence of, as are the others, but predominantly Durga Kali, the essence of safety, self-expression, and empowerment. Then we come to Lakshmi, and that is also the upper abdominal, the Manipura, and the heart. Because she's abundance, and fear of lacking or understanding abundance is what really guides these two spaces. And then Saraswati, Vak, as she's often called, is throat. It's your voice. It's the third eye center, your ability to be wise, to see clearly, to understand, to receive knowledge, and to express it. And then, of course, the crown. And the crown comes back to the Adi Shakti, to the Maha Ma, the Mahama, the Maha Mother, the great truth, which we call a chakra, but it's not really. It's a bridge. It's a bridge from human suffering to human awakening. It's a bridge from ignorance to wisdom or knowing, a bridge from suffering to healing. And if you were looking at the Tri-Devi, you would say that Durga, as Maha Durga, is the guardian of that gate, or the Adi Shakti, if you don't prefer a form, as she's formless. But you could also say the resurrection of Christ, You could also say the goodness of Allah. You put whatever name there you want to, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you do while you're waiting. What you do while you're waiting. Are you waiting and having faith in the waiting? Learning what you can while you go, while you move along. And we see this too if we talk about the masculine. We see that Shiva, very much the lower three chakras. And I say lower because they're closer to the earth, not because they're less than. Shiva's not less than anybody. Yeah. So these lower three chakras, very much Shiva. And then the power center and the heart, very much Vishnu. And then the throat, the third eye, Brahma. And the ultimate crown, Brahman, the universal consciousness. So it doesn't matter what we call him. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's all the same. It's all the same. The question is, what will you do while you're waiting? What will you do? And why does it matter? Well, in yoga we talk about the moment of death. And the moment of death, you can talk about it as the physical dying of the being, or the moment-to-moment deaths that we experience in life. And it's said in the yoga scriptures that when we come upon that moment, if we are serene at heart, if our mind is centered and our heart is focused on unity with Source and with all things, everywhere, then we will either end our cycle of birth and death, of suffering, or if we come back, we will come back in a state that is elevated in understanding such that it empowers further healing work on a much deeper level for ourselves and for all others. That's cool. I'll just die well. Now you go to the store to get your favorite overcast day comfort food. I don't know, let's just say it's those wonderful gluten-free vegan cupcakes that are made by Half Dozen Cafe over at the farmer's market. Particularly the chocolate one. And you go to the farmer's market and you get there and it's Sunday. They're closed. How did you receive that? You know, did you get all frustrated and bent out of shape? And now this day, it's wasted day because I can't have my favorite comfort food to make it better. Or do you have a moment of okayness that sets you up to the next moment, which can then be healing rather than suffering more at a deeper level or the same? Or heaven forbid it's Saturday and you go there and they just don't have any. I mean, that too is like, you know, we went to the Hive. If you haven't been there, you should. They're very good. Little promo for them. It's a little place in Kutztown, little cafe, and they really do a wonderful job there. And they have gluten-free bread. And we went there one time and they didn't have it. We were like, oh no, what are we going to eat now? You know. So we just had what we had without the bread. But there probably would have been another point in life where it would have been like, oh, now we can't eat. Which is really silly when you think about it. But isn't that what we say to ourselves about everything? Now I can't eat. Now I can't breathe. Now I can't be happy. Now I can't. We're really saying, now I won't. Now I won't. Now I won't be happy. Now I won't smile. Now I won't love. Now I won't. Because I didn't have the skills in place to wait patiently and to have faith in the waiting. So I'll just be born again into another moment of deep suffering.
I love how we just like ask ourselves to do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Cal?
Actually, two questions. If the ego has a tendency of causing us so much suffering.
When it's not balanced. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, yeah, and I guess you would say many times that's the case.
Most.
Why do we have it? Why was it given to us? Why is it part of us? That's number one. And number two, if there is no lack, and I've heard this over the years, and it's so hard to really embrace that. There is no lack, there is enough. There's abundance. As you said, there's more than enough. There's still examples or things out there which would lead you to think that's not the case, like people starving in foreign countries. Like you say, there's people in this country up in the mountains that don't have fresh water.
But
how do these things fit in?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer the second one first. So are those people starving because there isn't enough? You're a vegetarian, you know. Are they starving because there's not enough? Or are they starving because the powers that be, their egos are so out of balance that they're stealing resources?
Right.
So there is enough. And are the people up in the mountains without fresh water because there's not enough fresh water? No. It's because they're largely ignored. We have absolutely the technology to bring them fresh water right now in this moment. So it's not that the abundance isn't there. It's that the human ego is there dictating with a lot of imbalances. So why do we have this ego if its tendency is to get out of balance? Well, on the one side of it, it was a consequence of the conscious awakening of the divine, a consequence of that, karma. And on the other part, it's a reaction to our free will. So there's two parts that this plays. The first is that in the 24 principles of creation, according to Samkhya Yoga, at the very beginning there was nothing. There was only potential. And there were two potentials. There was the potential for stillness and the potential for movement. And that was it. There was nothing. There were no worlds, no suns, no stars, no you, no me, no nothing. There was just a void or a space. And within that space, there were two potentials of energetics. There was the potential for the energy to stay still and the potential for the energy to move. And it was still for a very long time. But then in some moment, what we call spanda occurred. And for some unknown reason, movement happened. And that little tiny movement, you know how when you chuck a pebble into the water doesn't just move right where the pebble hit the water. The water moves throughout the entire lake. And you see it in the form of ripples, which are only on the surface. But everything below the surface has also shifted in response to that pebble touching the water. So at the very beginning, the spanda occurred. And it changed everything. But the first thing that it changed was conscious awareness of universal consciousness, which you could say had been asleep up until that moment. Think of it like you just woke up in the morning. Before you woke up, you didn't know you existed. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh. And you turn your head the other way, maybe you stretch your fingers, and all of a sudden, you have an awareness of yourself. And now we're looking at that on a universal consciousness level. That universal consciousness was in this deep, deep, deep sleep. And then all of a sudden, for some unknown reason, it awoke to itself and became self-aware. And you can associate that with the very famous or very well-known, or however you want to put that, very well-known mantra, Soham, I am. It's just a statement, I am. It's like the thinker, I am. From there, from that intellect or that intelligence, that self-reflection, comes the ego, the divine ego, that asks a pertinent question. What am I? What am I? I've never been aware of myself before. I'm aware of myself now. What am I? I don't even know how to begin to answer that. So from that ego, which is called ahamkara, from that divine ego comes the mind. And the mind starts to define itself through the senses. Because now the senses are emerging. Well, I can understand myself through touch, smell, sight, sound, and taste. So the hands, the feet, the mouth, the eyes, the ears, the anus, the reproductive organs, they become activated so that they receive information. And now you smell that. You have acquired knowledge of some level as a result of smelling. You go outside and you feel the cool breeze on your skin, and you've acquired some level of knowledge based on that interaction. But also with the mind comes forward 3 states of being: tamas, rajas, and sattva. In this mix of creation, this consequence of the consciousness of the universe awaking to itself, comes our expression of being alive, which is our free will. So now you see you've got 10,000 ways that the ego can become imbalanced. Rather than focusing on the fact that the ego becomes imbalanced, in some ways it might be more productive to say to yourself, the ego, when it's balanced, is going to be what compels me to know myself. Shouldn't I work hard to balance it? Shouldn't I maintain a lifestyle that minimizes my tendency to get lost in my own suffering or to judge the suffering of others, and instead live a life that has more equanimity to it, so that the ego remains in a more balanced state? Yeah. Because the job of the ego is not to hurt you, it's to bring you home on some level.
So really, when the ego is balanced, it is our friend, really.
Sure.
It is something very, very positive.
If a lion came in that door, your ego is what would cause you to get up and leave, to get out of its way. Your ego is the discerning factor there, your ego and your intellect combined. And your heart and the quality of your heart is what will prevent you from trampling over other people in order to leave. Very important balance between the ego and the heart. Your ego will cause you to get up and to leave. The quality of your leaving is governed by your heart. So let's sit up nice and tall and close the eyes. And draw the hands together in front of the heart. And together we'll chant one beautiful Om, that all beings everywhere might be happy and free from suffering, and that our actions, our intentions, our thoughts have something to do with that, even if it's through the process of letting them be who they are, while still working for the goodness. Take a nice breath in.